Hope everybody's having a wonderful day. Today I'm going to specifically talk about self-sabotage, something I dealt with a long time, struggled with it for years and years and years of my life, and it's something that's very apparent in the people that I help as well, something that runs rampant. And so it's a very common problem, and it stems from self-belief. It stems from self-worth and how we view ourselves. And so if we have a low self-worth and we're trying to achieve a better goal or achieve a better life or accomplish anything that's out of the ordinary for us, we tend to self-sabotage. Because a lot of times we don't believe that we're worthy. And a lot of times this stems because we don't feel we're worthy. And so it can also happen from the belief, and then it can also happen from the feeling. And so how we act and feel is programmed into us since we were a kid. So during those hypnagogic state that we're in age 0 to age 7, specifically when we're in that theta wave state, we're taking everything in from our surroundings, from our parents, from how we were raised, how we were treated. And so that self-worth is formed based on how we observe our other family members being treated, ourselves being treated, how people react to certain situations. And so a lot of times, the boot just kind of comes onto us, and over time, a long time of just getting consistently stepped on emotionally, this contributes to this low self-worth, this lack of self-belief. And so that's one of the big root causes that I see across all people. And mine specifically was attributed to a good reason of that. And so how do we get rid of this if we notice this? And something that is really difficult for us when we're going on this journey and getting rid of it is that we know that it's a problem and we set out to do something new. It's just like we freeze. We get into this response where we just freeze. And so when that happens, when we're trying to go after that new goal, we freeze. And so this can show up in the form of, I have all these things to do today, but I'm just gonna lay in bed, or I'm just gonna go do this other thing that has nothing to do with what needs to get done. And so it's formed from that belief. And so these beliefs operate out of our subconscious. And so if we consistently find ourselves when we're trying to start that new diet or that new detox or start bettering our lives, and that we find that we distract ourselves, and this can be many times what I see is looking for external validation, because this is something that's linked with that, specifically that low sense of validation, because we look for those in external sources. And so the self-sabotage can show up in us looking for external validation in terms of other relationships, family members, friends, and whatever it may be that we're trying to escape from. And so when we're trying to carve a new path and create something new for our lives, and we always find ourselves in these situations where we're constantly on the search externally. And this is something that I did for a long time. I was trying to do something new, trying to start my business at one point, and it would always be with the external validation of women, relationships, and things like those, so that I wouldn't even move forward, because the energy of these different things that I was distracting myself with were taking up my daily routine, my daily basis, sort of say. And so it's hard to move your life forward when our cup is already full and we're filling it with things that don't need to be there. And so, not to say anything of those are bad, but when we're creating a new life and we're trying to evolve into something better, a lot of the times we have to subtract things. And so consistently, when we self-sabotage, we tend to add things into our life when they don't need to be added. And so the key into changing this self-sabotage behavior is, first, we have to let go of all these beliefs and why we feel worthy. Because a belief, it needs 3 legs to stand. It's like a table. And so if we look at different instances in our life on why we could potentially feel unworthy, then we'll identify those beliefs. But it isn't necessary that we go through and identify every single belief on why we could feel unworthy. Because after a lifetime of living and a lifetime of beliefs and a lifetime of people putting beliefs onto us, it becomes kind of difficult. And so one of my philosophies of life is we don't have to struggle in this life. And so getting rid of these beliefs and changing it to a more empowering belief doesn't have to be a struggle, doesn't have to be difficult. And so when we find ourselves into these patterns of self-sabotage, it's a pattern because, like I said before, it comes from our subconscious. And so, for example, if we're trying to heal through pain that we're working through, or we're trying to get that new job that we want, or start that new business, and if we find ourselves that we always are distracting ourselves with this specific type of external stimuli, which I mentioned earlier, that's when we need to interrupt that pattern. And when we can interrupt that pattern, and then we can set in something new, then that's when we can start to change. Because specifically, when I was starting my business, like I said earlier, I would freeze. And so I noticed when I was in the state of fear, I didn't want to move forward because my belief in my self-worth was holding me back from taking that next step. Because I didn't believe that I was worthy to take that next step, but then I also did believe that I could take the next step. And so my nervous system was starting to lock me up. And so it wanted me to stay in that place of comfort where I felt secure. Because, like I said before, it comes from our past. And so a lot of times we've learned through school and programming and family that when we're trying something new, and if we do it wrong, we're a failure. And so we have this core belief that it's not okay to fail, that it's not okay to mess up. And so when we have this core belief, it really prevents us moving forward. And so we have to be cognizant of that. And so we have to continuously take new steps forward so that we can continue to redefine our self-worth, our self-belief by the actions that we're taking. Because it's like if you climb up a mountain and you get really high, and say you're afraid of heights. When you go to a lower point and lower elevation, it doesn't seem as scary. And so that's the same thing that we have to do with the actions that we're taking. we have to take actions that we perceive as scary, and once we do that thing that's scary, it's not as scary the next time. And that's the key. So when we're in that state and we're locked up and we feel like we have this thing to do, but we're not actually doing it and making it happen, then that's what we have to do. We just have to jump. A lot of cars here. So we have to take that step and jump. Jump into that action that seems scary. Because if not, we're going to stay in the same place for the rest of our lives if we don't jump. And that's the key. Is we push up against that fear. We push up against that sense of fight or flight and freeze, where we're really scared because we don't know what's going to happen next for taking that action. And then we lean into it. And so this is something that takes a little bit of a willpower to kind of push forward. But that's what it takes. We have to take the actions, and by taking the actions, we go a step further each time. And every step that we take that's difficult, the next time that we do that specific step or that action, it becomes easier. And so that's one of the biggest aspects into getting over the self-sabotage. And the second one is wiring in this self-belief. Wiring in and changing our own story. Because we have a story about ourselves. Oh, I'm not good at this sport, or I'm not good at writing, or I'm not good at reading, or I'm not good at making a business. Whatever story it may be. I'm not good at speaking or talking to people. We have a story about ourselves that becomes a mantra. And so that mantra contributes to those beliefs, because we're pretty much parroting our beliefs. And so we can catch ourselves if we consistently talk about ourselves in a specific manner. In the way that we do something that's negative, we can catch ourselves and change that. And so we can counteract that by saying the complete opposite. By saying, I'm good at talking to people, I'm good at speaking, I'm good at whatever it may be. Because the thoughts in our head are basically like a mantra. And so if we repeat those on repeat, that's going to be programmed into our life. And it's going to further cement those beliefs that we have that are disempowering us, that are stopping us from moving forward. Oh, I don't believe I'm worthy of having a life free of pain. I don't believe I'm worthy of having my own business. I don't believe I'm worthy of having that partner, whatever it may be. And this happens through our language, because our language is just an extension of our thoughts and beliefs. And so that's why it's super important that we pay attention to those, because that's what's happening in front of us. It's just a reflection of our beliefs, thoughts, and feelings. And everything comes down to that. So, to wrap up this video, before I get ran over by a car, is first we have to identify what beliefs that we have. The core beliefs. Doesn't have to be all the beliefs. Because through action alone, we can push past those beliefs, those core beliefs that we have, and then we start to wire in new beliefs on the actions that we're taking. But we have to take that first initial step, which is extremely difficult. But once we take that first initial step, the next one becomes easier. And so then we gain momentum from that. And then that's what allows us to wire in that new belief about ourselves. Because if we become consistent and we don't believe we're consistent, the only way to become consistent is by action. And so that's a critical step. And so the next one is wiring in that self-belief and that self-love. And so that's something that's super critical. And so I'm gonna be working on a series of meditations that I'm gonna be putting out. And I know I've been saying this for a long time. Now that I'm not sick, I have a lot of energy now, a lot of free time, that I can do these meditations that'll be extremely helpful for this specific instance of self-sabotage. And so the next video that I'm going to put out in the next few days is going to be one on the self-love, a guided breathwork self-love meditation. And this will help in one of the steps to getting rid of the self-sabotage. Peace out.